Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's Transforming Construction 2024 webinar series. My name is Brandon Searle, and I'll be moderating today's session. Thank you, everyone, for joining. So just a quick overview of the webinar. Obviously, the welcome happening right now. Intro to our Offsite Construction Research Center and Building Transformations, who has partnered with us to deliver this webinar series. An introduction to the EY team, and then presentation by Gillian O'Boyle and Jonathan Morris, and then Q&A and discussion and wrap up. So quick overview and using the webinar features in Microsoft Teams. So you can submit questions at any time using the Q&A feature in the control bar. We'll be getting to the questions at the end of the presentation, but feel free to submit at any time and we'll make sure to include them during the moderated Q&A. If you have difficulty hearing, please check your speaker settings in the audio settings or submit a question saying that you're having difficulty. And my colleague Roshni, who's on the call, will do her best to support and correct that. Just a reminder, all sessions are being recorded and are going to be made available on both the Offsite Construction Research Center website and the Building Transformations website. So a bit of history about the University of New Brunswick. We're located in Fredericton, New Brunswick, and was founded in 1785. It's the home to Canada's first engineering, forestry, and computer science programs, with the first engineering course being offered in 1854. Since then, UNB has grown significantly, has another campus in St. John, New Brunswick, and has over 20 leading research institutes and centers with over 20 world-class research chairs. In addition to the research success, UNB has been very successful in helping foster a startup community on the East Coast and has seen over 100 startups come out of the university in the last decade. They were even named most entrepreneurial school in Canada when it was last awarded in 2014, I believe. And a quick overview of the Offsite Construction Research Center. So we were founded in 2019 in partnership with the private sector. And we went through and did a new strategic plan in 2022 where we focused on 4 values: industry relevance, which we try to do through, these webinars and collaborating with our industry partners. Obviously collaboration, that whole triple helix model with industry, government, and academia. Excellence and integrity. So being an academic institution, trying to remain as unbiased in everything we do. Couple pillars, we're focused on knowledge creation, knowledge mobilization, and ensuring sustainable governance in operations. The centers has an executive board which advises the OCRC on our research areas. And you can see a list here of the folks who currently sit on our board. They all kind of represent different stakeholders within the typical construction value chain, from architects, precasters, tier 1 or general contractors, fire engineers, modular manufacturers, developers, and so on. So if you are interested in having more information, you can check out our website about that. A few things about our research services. So at kind of the micro level, let's say, we focus on process and productivity improvement. That's both on site and in factories, or whether it's steel fabrication, mass timber, precast, modular manufacturers, etc. We focus on technology implementation. Again, that's automation, digital tools, robotics, design software, so on and so forth. Then we have a variety of lab testing, which we can collaborate with our peers at the university to access some of the structurals or materials labs. And we're actually launching our new building enclosure lab in January 2025. Again, just like here's our 4 kind of research pillars. One I didn't mention yet, but I'll make mention of now, is our benchmarking and innovation in construction. So at a macro level, we do quite a bit of research in current trends in the construction industry, looking at, the benchmarking, what exists and what the future needs are of the construction sector to, say, respond to the residential or institutional or whatever needs are required within the sector. So we have a few projects underway in that benchmarking innovation in construction, and that will hopefully lead to policy guidance, understanding the current state of the industry and how we can innovate, how we can ultimately increase productivity, and then hopefully lead to new methods of procuring, project delivery, and so on to, leverage offsite technologies and all the benefits that come with that. Quickly, we've partnered with Building Transformations on this, so I'll just do a little overview on that. So Building Transformations fosters industry innovation by providing programs which help members push the industry forward. The purpose is to advance civilization by driving the building industry to be global leaders in innovation and technology. And there's just a list at the bottom of a few different programs Building Transformations has. Members and audience. So there's over 2,000 members, quite a large following on social media and so on. You may recall or have heard of CanBIM. So CanBIM rebranded to Building Transformations about 4 years ago. It was originally the Canada BIM Council. So I'd encourage folks to check that out. And then you can check out the memberships. There's both corporate, individual memberships. There's the Innovation Spotlight Awards, which is happening in less than a month. I hope to see some of you there. There's our publication, which kind of follows up on the awards, highlighting all the different projects across the different categories. The 2025 event schedule with the two primary ones, big ones being highlighted, Austin, Texas, and Toronto in April. And Toronto might actually move to fall 2025. And then just highlighting some of the mission partners. So Building Transformations works, or operates across both the US and Canada and has a variety of mission partners to help achieve the goals and objectives of the organization. So finally, just thank you to our sponsors. We are continuously supported by OSCO Construction Group, who is our founding partner at the Research Center, as well as the Government of Canada, who has provided support to host events like these, as well as our conferences and so on. And then finally, our marketing partners, we rely on them to spread the word. So thank you to all our marketing partners who have helped with that. Now, getting to the good stuff, I'm happy to present introduce Gillian O'Boyle, who's the partner UKI Tech Consulting with EY based in the United Kingdom, as well as Jonathan Morris, who's Director of Infrastructure Consulting, also located across the ocean. They'll be presenting today Unlocking Value Through AI in Infrastructure, and I believe they also have a publication that is out to the public on this. So I'll now invite Jonathan and Gillian to turn on their video and audio and present their slide deck, and I'll be quiet until the Q&A.
Thank you very much, Brandon. It's a privilege to be here today with the University of New Brunswick, which has such a great heritage in startups and innovation in the construction industry, and very pleased that you invited us, and thank you very much for dialing in to listen. We've got about 15 or 16 slides that will take you through, that will go through AI in infrastructure and what we see as the challenge in some of the case studies of where we think we can adopt it in a more effective way. And we'll take it in two parts. So I'll go through AI and infrastructure, some of the challenges, blockers and barriers to adoption, and then hand over to Gillian, who will go through some case studies and examples. Let's share my screen. So I'll start with the barriers, challenges and opportunities and a bit of the context as to how EY got involved in looking at this as a topic. So we've been a strategic advisor to an organisation which is called FIDIC, which is the Federation of Consulting Engineers that federates globally and is headquartered in Geneva, about 100 different organizations that look at engineering, construction and contracting across the world. And what we've been doing with them is trying to work with them on an international basis to understand the most significant challenges the infrastructure industry faces going forwards. And we've done a couple of reports in the last 2 years. Last year, we did a report on the gap in funding that currently needs to be closed in infrastructure to achieve net zero. And we discussed in that report a number of recommendations about how that gap could be closed. And this year, we've been focusing on how artificial intelligence can help unlock that future. So we're in an environment where we have to do more for less, and there's a greater funding challenge. Artificial intelligence is an emerging technology, and we really wanted to engage with those global leaders to understand how they saw those challenges and what the blockers might be to adopting AI in construction and infrastructure. So the challenges facing infrastructure are much bigger than we think. If you look at the current policies of all the main developed countries and their governments that commit funding to achieving net zero through sustainable infrastructure, they currently only commit about 75 trillion by 2050. And actually to achieve the full remit of net zero, that would actually need to be a much higher figure of 139 trillion. So we've got this 64 trillion funding gap, which at the moment, if not plugged, will mean that we do not hit the target needed to maintain warming beneath 1.5 degrees. And it's a particularly challenge because construction productivity has been stagnant over the past few decades. There's been a higher level of innovation take up in manufacturing and other sectors like pharmaceuticals and retail, but construction has really sort of dragged its heels along the bottom. It hasn't been hugely good at innovating and adopting emerging technology. So in that context, that funding gap and the need to do more for less, it hasn't really picked up that challenge. So that issue is endemic. It's global. It's not just in the UK or Canada. It's everywhere in infrastructure, and it's also right in front of us. Next slide. Going on to the next slide, the vertical growth and adoption of AI is incredible, and there can be a little bit of fatigue about AI and feel like at some degree it is overhyped. But actually, if you look at the adoption and take up of a tool that probably most of us are familiar with, like ChatGPT, which is a phenomenally effective large language model, you can see on this graph here on the left-hand side just how quickly that's extended to over 100 million users in just a matter of months. And of all of the industrial revolutions, as we term it in its broadest sense, over the last 250 years, this has been by far the fastest take up. So it's faster than steam power, it's faster than assembly lines and automated production, it's faster than computers in the World Wide Web. It is the fastest take up of any technology we've seen so far, and there are new tools and applications coming out all the time. And both Gillian and I are sort of astonished at how many new applications and forms of this technology emerge between us publishing the report and today. So it's got the potential to transform the infrastructure industry, and it is something that will need to be harnessed because otherwise it will happen to us. So what are the barriers to adoption in infrastructure, and why is it the case that it's very difficult to adopt in construction? So there's really sort of four key areas, and these are all areas we tested through our meeting in Geneva back in April, where we consulted with all the global leaders of engineering organizations. So the first one is there's a lack of clarity on the return on investment. They're not really sure about what investment in AI actually means, where that investment should be targeted, and the benefits that would result from doing it. So that lack of clarity just leads to sort of a paralysis in decision-making commitment to it, which defers and delays take up. The second one is there's a lack of skilled workers. So the workforce in construction infrastructure is probably slightly older than the average, and there's a shortage of skilled professionals. Some of them are now starting to retire, and the expertise in AI and data analytics just simply isn't there to really understand both how important it is and also how it can be done to be utilized in the industry. And that's providing a real barrier as well. Thirdly, if we're completely honest with ourselves, there's also a bit of cultural resistance. It's quite a risk-averse industry. It's got quite a well-developed way of doing things and delivering things. And there's probably a bit of a perception that AI could be a bit of a threat to existing business models and ways of working. And that creates this prevailing culture of resistance to change. And the final thing is technological fragmentation. It is the case in infrastructure that there's a variety of technological platforms that are used and some legacy platforms as well. And that lack of standardization means it's very difficult for data to be exchanged. And those data interoperability issues complicate the integration of AI. So if we take a step back and think about what artificial intelligence actually is, it's a very fast neural net, which is able to analyze and predict outcomes and outputs based on a huge amount of data. And if it doesn't have access to that data, AI isn't very effective. So the first thing we always face as a challenge in AI adoption is how does it get access to a relevant data set to allow it to be predictive and actually help us do our jobs? So what does that fragmentation look like in practice for an infrastructure project or program? I really like this slide because it kind of brings to life diagrammatically the data siloed nature of a major infrastructure program. These could be multi-billion pounds, dollars. They could be a huge amount of money. Toronto Metro, Crossrail, we've got nuclear power plants going on here. They're all very similar. The designer's got data in its data center and its CAD drawings. The client has got data on what it wants and its own confidentiality around that. The contractor's got data on how it's going to build it and how it's going to manage the logistics. The asset manager wants data in a way it can operate and maintain in the future. Various suppliers will have data in their own data sets, and then you've got subcontractors adopting their own methods as well, sometimes because of the size of the business, perhaps using a platform that's not quite as up to date. And there's a huge amount of time and energy that is spent in the delivery of any infrastructure project in exchanging that data between all of those parties and managing those exchanges. And that's where errors can drop in, that's where delays can drop in, and that's where misalignments can occur, which delay the project and drive up cost. So how can we adopt a systems-based thinking to unlock value across all of that and really sort of utilize AI, and how can it actually operate in a way that can help us realize all that? Well, any project, any infrastructure project is working as an ecosystem within wider society, and there's sort of two lenses really. There's internally within the project, there's externally out into the wider environment and all the political, economic and social challenges that drive infrastructure decisions and what end users need. But there are sort of 5 key areas where we think AI can have a real benefit. So the first one is determine the purpose. So AI can do a huge amount of work to analyze stakeholder sentiment and improve the definition of the purpose of the project, not only the business case, but also the asset planning and its selection and how it can best satisfy those stakeholder needs. Why that's important, it can short circuit planning and approval processes, make sure that the maximum number of stakeholders are brought on board and deal with some of the political and approval challenges that might normally delay the initiation of the project. Secondly, it can help plan end-to-end delivery much more clearly. It can generate conceptual designs. It can generate hundreds of conceptual designs. It can test concepts. It can very quickly come up with lots of ideas based upon the inputs you give into it and the outcome needs. And once you've got that, it can then help you analyze a very clear path to planning that end-to-end delivery and understanding how you can treat risk in so doing. The third thing is it can help to confirm the right operating model. If you can utilize a common data environment and create a digital twin that is data centered on it, by which we mean a virtual twin of the project you're trying to build, it allows you to analyze the impacts of design changes and how you might alter the design of the project as you go through, because that is inevitable to some extent, in a way that will be the most efficient way to deliver it, and understand what the impact of it is prior to making the decision. The fourth thing then is it integrates ways of working. Going back to the previous slide on data exchange and how data works across a fragmented model and the number of people that are involved in exchanging that information, AI can actually integrate project controls and performance oversight. It can do predictive analytics on some of the data coming out from the projects and program, understand what that might mean in terms of future issues, and actually help people get ahead of those issues. So the ways of working are aligned in such a way that can protect delivery. And finally, it can actually help you in operations, operate responsive assets, real-time data feeds from the project and how it's being used and how the user's engaging with it and how it's performing can actually improve operations and sustainability. So there are a lot of different ways in which AI and different forms of AI can take place on a major infrastructure project. The challenge here is getting the adoption. It's getting the common data environment established and allowing the AI access to that data and the information it needs to do the job to actually help us deliver our infrastructure projects faster and more efficiently. I'll now hand over to Gillian, who is going to touch on some of the case studies and examples. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. And let me also echo what Jonathan said and my thanks for giving us the opportunity to share some of our learnings, what we've done in conjunction with FIDIC today. And if you could just go on to my first slide, Jonathan. Thank you. So one of the things that the FIDIC report has looked at is it's looked at the industry as a whole. And I think, some of the things that Jonathan has said in relation to sort of cultural resistance and some of the barriers around particularly very long, large capital programs in the construction industry, that the report comes up with 3 foundational commitments. And I think the point that I want to make is these commitments need to be industry-wide. One of the things that we see within AI, within industries, is that it requires all of the value chain and all those players in the ecosystem to work together. And so just to kind of bring that to life a little bit, there's 3 things that have came out that are seen as critical. So first of all, so regardless of the stage of the asset life cycle or the value chain of where you sit, so how can you embrace it as a whole? So first of all is mindset. So that's cultivate an open and collaborative environment for AI adoption. Often in the construction industry, there will be people in competition, there will be contractual reviews, but one of the fundamental things around unlocking the value to the system is if you can create an open and collaborative environment. Raise awareness, foster discussions, particularly around where AI, responsible AI and ethical AI, and some of the considerations that we need to think about as we democratize data. Build trust to encourage data and insight sharing. So, again, back to that collaborative environment. Skill set. So we talk a lot, particularly in the construction industry, about evolving skill sets. And this is not a new conversation. With the rapid growth of AI, that becomes even greater. So how do you be able to develop those competencies that you're going to need as you see tool sets and things become differently? There is a lot of professional qualifications in the construction, both in contractual around NEC4, around APM and project management. There are governments working together now to look at what would be the professional qualification for AI within the construction industry. Technology moves really fast. When we're planning, AI implementations, you're almost working with our clients. We're almost growing together as new technologies are come out every month or two. And again, there's a legacy here. So how do you ensure the infrastructure industry remains for future generations and this brings out sustainable business? Tool sets, so tools and frameworks for AI implementation. So offer the right tools for practical implementation. And that comes down, so you heard Jonathan mention about digital twins and data sharing. So having a common data platform, simplifying the infrastructure IT estate that allows data to be shared, that allows for simple language to be used. So it can be used for ChatGPT, large language models. And implement AI-specific contract provisions to support innovation. And I see a questions come up in the chat, which we can pick up. But construction contracts will have to evolve and change. And part of that is around the innovation piece around AI and the need for the agility and speed. So we often see within construction contracts, and the NEC4 are talking about it, that there are certain provisions made, some around ethical use of sharing of data, and the provisions that need to be done for that, but also for adoption and sharing of tools. And if we just go on to the next slide. So what does this look like? So within the construction industry, and how does that effectively go together and to overcome some of the barriers? So it's how do we all adopt that holistic approach? And part of that is creating this sort of innovation hub. So organizations are creating their own hubs within themselves, but also we do see professional groups of organizations creating an innovation hub, which creates that operating model framework. To bring that to life a little bit, that starts with your business strategy and vision. So aligning AI adoption with businesses. And we see 2 ways this is done. Often it's done within the centre, within a hub, and then has to be adopted within the organisation. That's a longer route. So there is a need to scale where you're growing and scaling quickly. How do you adopt AI throughout your organisation? That sets with setting a strong strategy and vision. Then you need to put all the governance, risk and compliance around it. We talk a lot about ethical governance for AI. We need to make sure that AI models have the right guardrails around them, that they're not used, that there's not bad actors within the IT infrastructure. And also as well, financial stewardship. So what is the transparency around the investments? How do you actually calculate the benefits of AI within your organisation? Then the people team have a great role to play in relation to organisation structure and talent. Is the organisation structured the right way in order to be able to adopt AI within its infrastructure end-to-end asset lifecycle? What are the capabilities? What are the capabilities that the IT department need? As you democratize data, what do the data stewards have? What does this mean for our asset information and geospatial information, where we're in a collaborative world and the AI agentic machines are making some of those decisions? Collaborating with partnerships. It's brilliant to be able to sit and talk here with the University of New Brunswick. I think academia has a huge role to play, and the partnerships, the collaboration hubs we see, the collective cafes that are popping up within the UK are really driving innovation in the AI space. And then the last thing is architecture. I think legacy IT functions have been the guardians of the IT estate. Now the CIO and CTOs have a much more strategic role with AI growing so rapidly. So one, there's a role around common data platforms. If you're going to create digital twins, if you're going to get collaboration, having a common data platform or common data standards is a critical step in the way. But then also, how do you standardize the IT estate to make it easy to integrate, to make it easy for models to be able to be built? Yeah, thanks, John. So the value of the report is around how do you unlock the value for infrastructure? What does this all mean? And there's lots of things. And Jonathan touched on a few around errors and delays in the programme. And I think particularly with large capital programmes, we often see with clients, and we've been working with clients for many years going, how can you help me streamline my cycle time? How can I reduce errors? How can I effectively get cost certainty between high-level design and low-level design? And there's been a lot of research done, both by FIDIC and NSIT, which is the National Institute of Standards. And there's a number of levers that can be pulled. So this is a sample £1 billion capital programme, and there's lots of things that can be implemented around the shortest path to value. But particularly, there can be up to 20% saving, which could be significant in adopting AI, and particularly and that's more than just automation, so automation with design, but it is reducing errors, providing accurate forecasts, automating manual tasks, allowing your professionals to focus on more high-value activities, taking the pain out of manual reporting, having transparency of the truth and access of data for everybody. Has seen significant benefit for a lot of our clients and the industry in relation to capital spend, which also as well from an industry perspective unlocks capital infrastructure funding to be able to build more and do more with it. Move on. So often a question we get asked, and one of the questions in the research the report focused on was, well, where is the best place for me to do this? How can I implement AI? And I think there's two things. One, the industry needs to work together. I think that's critical. But also you can put AI into almost every phase of the construction process. And there's more and more tools being delivered every day. And I've got a client example of where they have implemented a full digital AI solution for their full end-to-end capital programme. But if I just take some of the things that are around the benefits of AI and structure, so improve project delivery, streamlining project management. There's a lot of AI tools out there now and models around being able to take project data out of legacy systems like Primavera, use a risk-based approach into analysing the data and standardising how all the projects within a programme are run. So it enhances collaboration. So all the players in the life cycle understand what's happening and creates a smoother execution. Enhanced decision making. Within a long-term capital programme, the ability to forecast, to be able to have actual data-driven insights can be really, really important. It allows for earlier intervention. It allows for reduced manual error, and it allows you to be able to maximise and optimise how your plans and designs on the ground are done. Sustainability. So AI aids in optimising energy consumption, reducing waste, developing eco-friendly solutions. So that ability to be able to identify alternative solutions and how you get implemented in the programme. Enhanced safety. We have one of our clients, it's a steel company that's using drone data to be able to assess, one, accessibility of PPE, but also be able to use data that does not require a human to go and check in a site, assess for hazards, and they have seen a 27% reduction in their early warning risks of potential accidents. So again, a lot of different type use cases. I think predictive analytics around operational efficiency, particularly around things like where you're identifying risk. And one of the examples I'll talk about is how, what an organization's doing to manage risk within its organization using a fully digital AI solution. Cost savings. So often when we talk about AI, people think about, am I going to save money? Am I going to save cost because it's going to replicate tasks? Whereas actually we see the value being driven by a lot of different things. However, that being said, for predictive maintenance, where you have the ability to take multiple data sources and predict where you might have an outage in a capital program, being able to minimize downtime obviously is a cost saving, but also we see within, for example, the telecoms industry, we see the adoption of AI for strategic planning. So AI tools to create semantic layering model and capability that will show you a surface type of a road that you're going to dig up. It will allow you then to be able to take multiple data sources, including things like, permits from, a government authority, and take that and put that into build plans. And what that can do is drive down at desktop design, at high level design, minimize any changes or reductions down to less than something like 5% as you get out in the ground and build. So that has significant cost savings. And in the research that we've done, we've estimated that to be between about 20 and 25% of the total capital cost of the programme. So quite significant. If I then just move on. Yeah, so I thought I'd bring to life. So this is a client that we've been working at in the oil and gas industry. And they have a long-term, multi-billion-pound programme, and they've looked at what can they do around, first of all, they want to be able to predict future durations and monitor risk. So it started actually as, how do we manage risk properly within the programme? They now have a fully digital solution, but they have, how do you monitor risk? So create standardization of how risks are categorized. So they have like a risk, almost like a risk chat GPT, a risk assistant, where a project manager can ask questions and get standard answers. It then uses AI to scan all of the data within all of the project management systems and actually make, through an agentic model, make decisions to be able to say that actually the risk of this program slipping because of either cost or delays or overruns or supply chain issues, and creates a scoring mechanism that allows the organization to be able to assess their different projects within their large capital program. And it is the AI engine that is looking at revisions to the programs. It's scenario plans for the program manager to say, here's 3 or 4 scenarios that may or may not happen. How would you like to intervene? It does automatic progress updates. It collates and creates data to put into a central program management digital tool that can be shared both with exec management and people out on the ground building. And just gives greater insight into what's going on. And what they have seen is that, one, by managing the risk in this way, they're able to intervene much earlier. So cost overrun is significantly reduced. They've seen a reduction in health and safety. They've been able to do more. So particularly with the CapEx allocation, been able to implement more projects within the programme and just have a much more robust, efficient way of working. And then it's on to my last slide. So again, just to reiterate the point around what FIDIC is saying, is actions required by all the industry stakeholders. And this is one of the reasons why we are out talking to people. So, and I think we've got some guiding principles. What are the ambitions for the industry, but also then who needs to make this happen? And that's from the asset owner to the asset manager to the contractors, whether they be prime contractors or third-party contractors. What do government need to do? What do the investors behind capital programs need to do? And it's across 5 key guiding principles. So determine the purpose. So between the asset manager and the asset owner, is it really clear that assets meet their purpose before funding is committed? Plan for end-to-end delivery. So using some of the tools and things that we've talked around making better decision making, richer insight. How do we make business cases more robust? Confirm the operating model. So common project goals that fosters shared contribution towards information. Integrate ways of working. So again, as start when we talked about mindset and tool set for AI, how do we strengthen delivery intelligence, resilience and control? We're going to improve overall project programs and do more. How do we get all areas of the value chain to integrate together? And that's in systems, it's in data, it's in ways of working, it's in processes, it's in standards. And then By looking at all of that from both the technology provider and educational institutions, assets become more connected, they become more responsive, and we have an ecosystem, an environment that will leave a legacy of sustainability for the future, but also will perform better. And I think that's the end of my slides.
Perfect. Thank you. So a few questions came in, and I have some questions as well. I'm going to share my Q&A screen. Just 1 second, please. For the recording, it will look better. So I guess the first question that came in, it was from Brian Hall, who's with the Canadian Precast and Prestressed Concrete Institute, CPCI. And actually, it was related to a question I was going to ask. So, Jonathan, at the beginning, you were talking about the deficit or the gap in infrastructure investment, and we're seeing that across Canada, and that's without. I think some of those projections are without the net zero target in mind. That's just like, okay, replacing like for like type of thing with anticipated, population growth, demand, and things like that. One thing that's been top of mind is productivity trends, and so Brian wrote, according to 2024 TD Economics report, construction in Canada has seen no productivity growth over the last 40 years. The industry's, as we all know, is slower to adopt new technologies. So how can we help drive the adoption of AI? And just on that productivity note, I am interested in seeing or getting your thoughts on, both of your thoughts on how could productivity increases in the industry be enabled through AI technology, but also do you think we could see all of a sudden that shift from that line that says stays stagnant, whereas we've seen manufacturing, agriculture, everything else go up? Could we finally see that shift in productivity increase as a result of AI, or have you guys done much research in that area, and how might that affect the gap?
Gillian, do you want me to take that one first and then hand over to you?
Yeah, you can do it.
So I think, I mean, look, the productivity challenge in Canada is exactly the same one we got in the UK, right? It's something we're seeing both sides of the pond. I think the first thing to do is to get construction industry contractors and partners to experiment with AI, to use it, demystify it. One of the most effective things that we've done is where we've been to workshops or seminars that have allowed exercises or workshops, people to use real life AI tools to see what they can do for them. And once they start to use some of these large language models, ChatGPT is one example, but there are many, many others. There are, many ones that help you to scope documents. Microsoft Copilot is another example. They suddenly start to see how it can actually help them, write tender documents, come up with better plans, structure their answers better, and by engaging with it, it demystifies it and helps to realize its actual benefits to them and their business in a way that no longer feels a threat. So I think that's the first point. The second point is how we talk about AI. So I think one common thing is, at the moment, whenever you talk about AI, a lot of people like to talk about the data engine and what happens behind the scenes and how neural networks actually work and, where the data goes and how it comes out. Most people aren't probably hugely that interested in that aspect of it. And you can sometimes go down a technical or data funnel that loses people. But when you start talking about some of the things Gillian was talking about, more effective design, cost savings, saving time and schedule, avoiding those delays, when you start to talk about outcomes and how AI can help you deliver that, that's when you hook people in.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that point, when it talks about productivity and growth, I think with large scale capital investment, particularly where it's backed investment by kind of private equity, the more, CapEx efficiency can be delivered, then you're going to have additional room for growth. And starting to see that, I think it's at the start of the journey. I think it'll take a while for that really to come through. But the more we can push that adoption and start to create those capital efficiencies, starting to see it coming through, as I say, in things like the telecom infrastructure industry. But again, where it's externally backed investment and there's a return on capital, you'll start to see greater investment and a stimulation in that and greater growth.
Great. No, thank you for that. Yeah, and I know, I think I read last week in Australia, they announced a $900 million investment into productivity, what the minister there. And so I think that's on top of the government's minds around the world and of how we increase that. And it ties back to the gap in infrastructure needed, as well as the housing crisis that we're seeing nationally here, but I'm sure it's global as well. I'll go to I have a bunch of questions, but I'll get to the ones from the guests first. So next one is around contracts, and I think we could go broader and go into, you know, procurement contracts, project delivery methods, etc. So how are these contractual frameworks being implemented with the use of AI for construction projects?
Yeah, I mean, I can take that one, Jonathan. You can add into it. I mean, I think a lot of the professional bodies are looking at, so it's split into two things. So like, so how do you use AI construction contracts? So, you know, NEC, obviously a big from a procurement perspective, and there's NEC had this as one of their headline topics in their 2024 conference. So it's for anybody's interested in that, it's worth having a look at that output, which is shared. But a couple of things. So looking at, first of all, how AI can make contracts more efficient. So, you know, large language models can make, you know, standardization of terms, you know, how do you search and make contract terms and revisions? So there's that one. How does it actually make the contracts more efficient and easily shareable? And also as well, standardize them. So there's a big desire from some of the big, you know, institutes, and so the, you know, ICE met in 2024 as well around. So the how can we make contracts more standardized? That's, I think, a lot what we're seeing. And the standardization is around being able to collaborate and share them. And then how do you harness them to be able to share them out within the industry and share them out within the value chain? I think that's what you're starting to see. And I think where we had the Black Book of NEC and other kind of construction contracts, you will start to see AI provisions being made within them.
Great. Yeah, no, that's anything to add to that one, Jonathan? Or
just very briefly, I think Gillian summed it up very well. So the new engineering contract and FIDIC suite of contracts at an industry standard level is key. The other thing as well is whenever a client commissions a supply chain to do a big infrastructure project for it, legally to make sure there are open data clauses in those contracts so the data can be shared across the whole project. Now, so there's a lot of resistance to this, but actually if you think about it, most of the data on a project actually isn't that commercially sensitive. And your rate card is and your commercial model is, but you know, the design you want access, you know, how you're going to construct and how the logistics will be planned, you probably want to share that anyway. So you know, getting that into the contracts with the client so that at the very start a common data environment can be established, and then that digital twin enabled across which AI can be utilized is a key thing to unlock as well.
Yeah, no, that's an important point. That's actually where I was going to go with one of my questions, because earlier on you were both talking about common data environment, and you know, so actually I'm on the board for Building Transformations. A lot of my colleagues are large tier 1 contractors, or I guess what we call GCs, general contractors here. Who, you know, they're looking, as well as architecture and design firms who are looking at creating their strategy for the use of AI. And a lot of it is, again, it's looking at, we have all this data fragmented across our internal organization. So getting that in a standardized, and then setting up policies and IT processes to leverage that data and use it, which is great for those organizations. But how can we incentivize it across the supply chain? So then, you know, if it's a big public-private partnership, that open data environment might be something that is, or like a vertically integrated supply chain. But how do we do it when the construction industry is so fragmented? How can we kind of apply that, or what are your thoughts on how to overcome some of those hurdles? I don't know who. I'll throw that to either of you.
Jonathan, do you want to go first, or I can go first?
I would focus, I'll just say one thing, because Gillian's got far more experience of delivering these things than I do. At the very start, coming up with a digital strategy, a digital and data strategy. We've tried, without naming any clients in particular, we've tried pitching this to many clients, and very few actually get it. But of course, they all talk the language of doing things quicker, better, simpler, and saving time and money. But if you can get that strategy set at the outset, how are you going to pull together your supply chain, all that information to build a digital and data model, create that common data environment, utilize AI to most effectively deliver the project. It's a fundamental part of your delivery strategy, and we need to get much more comfortable in making that equal with a commercial strategy and the delivery strategy and an enterprise strategy. One of the first things you do on every project. That's the place I think we need to move to.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. And I think where we see this implemented a lot, and I think in the construction industry, I think because purely from a health and safety perspective, there's a lot of standardization of terms, standardization of contracts, although there might be differences between them. But I think, Brendan, you raised a good point in the sense of, where we have tier 1 contractors down to the tier 3, tier 4. How do you incentivize everybody, particularly where people are operating under tight margins? And I actually think this is where AI in the technology space plays a really important role, because actually, traditionally, one of the things you would see with large infrastructure providers, they would build APIs into systems. The smaller organizations have the freedom to be able to unlock and buy, point solutions. They're not having to invest into very heavily IT technology. And what AI can do is, instead of having to replicate legacy systems, which takes time and is painful, you can create agentic models that can be able to just integrate and move the data. And when you can do that, so it minimizes the time, minimizes the effort, and actually is much more of an incentive. But I think to Jonathan's point, it's actually having that strategy set right up front, starting with the right standards. And then there's an education piece to say, you do not necessarily need to invest heavily into a full IT infrastructure to be able to benefit from some of the things that AI can do, especially with the evolving technology at the minute. I mean, a lot of us can do quite a lot of AI stuff on our phone. So, and I think that innovation is actually of a huge benefit, but there's an education piece to make sure everybody understands that.
For sure. Yeah, no, that's sure. It is funny too. I think it's a bit of like a black box to some people, but in the end, all it is helping us, collecting information and monitoring what we do and say, and then helping us come to that conclusion quicker, by the sounds of it. That's probably oversimplifying things, but my last question is just that I have, and then I'll go to the audience again. What role do you see the government playing in standardizing data and this whole shift towards the use of AI? And I asked this, in Canada, there's a large research program funded through the National Research Council, and part of that is focus on construction sector productivity and digitalization. And so they're looking at e-permitting and digitizing the building codes and different things like that. I think my opinion is that they can play a role in de-risking some of this new tech by, showing that it works on public sector projects, and then hopefully the private sector joins in. But what role do you see the government playing in the standardization of data, and then maybe policies and things around how the data is used?
I think if I just pick up on some of within the UK, there is there's a global ambition around AI and the value that it brings. And I think that we have government agencies such as DCIT and DESNZ here in the UK, and they have published policies around, global digital technology standards. And they do set them out with all the different organizations. Where, for example, I do see it as we all work towards, kind of a net zero energy transition and clean power. There's a huge amount in the energy business where the government is driving those initiatives, and actually AI is at the forefront of it, and it's been talked about quite a lot in the UK. So I think particularly when it comes to data sharing standards, the government can help by creating policies for open data sharing. So with that, and that, what I mean by that is, the government has been invested extremely heavily in AI data centers, compute power, standards, security protocols across the industry. And that this doesn't necessarily apply to the construction industry. You can apply this across, but the more that they can create industry professional bodies that assist in that everybody's adopting the same policy, same security protocols, sharing a platform, open data platforms is huge. So the more that they see investment into that and creation of policies, I think will bring value. But we do see quite a lot of activity in this space. Jonathan?
Yeah, absolutely, Gillian, agree with all of that. And of course, to build on it, it was sort of already touched on already. Governments can introduce requirements for um, in their tenders for the supply chain to demonstrate how they intend to adopt AI and how they intend to share their data openly to be most effective, to qualify them into government-led tenders on government infrastructure projects. And that could lead to an industry shift. They won't win the work unless they think about it and work out how they're going to collaborate. And then you'll get some case studies and examples, and people are at the tip of the spear and adopting it, which can then provide a template for how other people in the industry can adopt it. So the government can both set standards and examples of best practice, but I think also can structure things so that they are realized as well.
Mm. Yeah, I was thinking kind of that carrot and stick approach to it. I was curious though, is there fear that by implementing some of that, some of the potential laggards or smaller organizations won't be able to compete? I'm thinking back to the BIM mandate in the UK, and and across the ocean and hear things, but I heard as a result, some were able to react quickly and others not as much, and because of that, the market became in a way less competitive. Do you see that potentially happening, or is there some lessons learned that we could apply so that when these new tech is implemented, it can be in a way that supports the industry to adopt and innovate quicker?
Yeah, I think there has been some lessons learned across, if you think of the evolution of the systems and tools. I'm just going to talk purely from a technology perspective, but I actually do think that one of the benefits of this exponential growth we see in all areas of AI and the democratization of data, it actually sort of levels the playing field a bit more than I think we've seen in previous. And I just think the speed of growth and the ability that we have, and the accessibility of it probably opens up the industry a bit more. Where government and think tanks and policies can play is by making sure that there's a level playing field with policies and standards. But I do think that ability, I think the playing field is probably more level than it has been previously.
Yeah. I'd almost turn the question around, Brandon, because sometimes we find that some of the smaller organizations are actually much more agile and nimble and faster at taking up new technologies and ways of doing things than the bigger organizations, which have to lumber through more approvals and more bureaucracy. So, the criteria has got to be designed carefully. You can't design it in such a way that qualifies out people who can't afford to invest in really big tools and platforms. But done right, it can be a powerful way of encouraging innovation.
Yeah, no, that's valid as well, for sure. So there's two more questions or a few more, I guess. But the one, so we have quite a few instructors, professors, faculty members join us, and mostly teaching the next group of engineers, architects, infrastructure planning professionals. So just to accelerate AI adoption in the industry, what specific skills do you think these construction professionals should prioritize developing moving forward?
I can go first, let you come in, Jonathan. I think I actually was having this conversation with a government client the other day where they're looking at, doing a capability skills analysis and what are the future skills that we need. And actually, well, if you think of the speed that AI is working at, so AI search is coming out the next 2 months. Meta have just launched Llama 3.1. NVIDIA are investing heavily in GPU power. It's moving so quickly that actually one of the skill sets that is coming out is an ability to be adaptable. So data literacy and digital literacy will always be hugely important. And I just think there's so much out there, and there's so much skills that can be enhanced by, there's loads of online learning, there's loads of professional things if people want to become literacy in some of the language around AI. But actually, one of the government reports that was published is around, across any industry, that ability to adapt and change and grow. So again, data is going to be key. So where you are literate in your own data, where you have a digital literacy, is really worth investing in. Investing in being curious about some of the new technologies and having the right skill sets to be able to adapt and change. That is how I think as professionals in the construction industry, they're going to be able to adapt and move with the times.
Nice. Yeah, and I think there's shift to like micro credentialing in the education system and stuff, where it's like continuous lifelong learning, and we're seeing it through even LinkedIn Learning and things like that. So thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Brandon, just to
go
build
ahead.
on that, I mean,
Yeah.
we won't all need to become data architecture experts on how neural networks work. There was a very good example recently at the Major Projects Association conference in the UK that I thought was a really good way of explaining AI. That it's about bookends. So the AI is the magic that happens in the middle, where it goes through a large neural net to look at predictive answers based upon what you input. But what we'll have to get better at, rather than crunching data in the middle on spreadsheets, which is what a lot of us sometimes spend too much time doing at the moment, we'll have to get better at asking better questions, which is the left-hand side of the bookend, and then being accountable for the answers, which is the right-hand side of the bookend. So when you ask a good question, the AI model will crunch through a lot of data. It'll then give you an answer, and whatever answer it is, you're accountable for that answer. So we as industry professionals we might be able to accept the AI tools doing more data crunching and analysis and doing it faster, but we'll have to ask really good questions to get the most out of it. And we'll have to be accountable for those answers and then recalibrate the question if we don't get quite what we want, and understand how we can shape it. So in general, better at questions to get better analysis and output.
Yeah, that's great. That's a very good point. And I've heard of some colleagues here, implementing like a Chat GPT assignment where it's you go through iterations of your question to eventually get to the answers you want. And I mean that's a very small scale, but it's at least getting towards that critical thinking and critical thought around questions you're asking. There's two more, speaking of questions, there's two more. See if we can get them quick, and then I'll do a 1 minute wrap up. But next one was, how would you rate the AI predictability of long-term capital planning and large infrastructure portfolios?
Yeah, I think I actually touched a little bit on this when I was talking about, strategic and scenario planning, because actually, if you think about it, forget AI and technology for a second, when predictability of long-term capital costs over multi-billion, multi-year programs, research has shown us for years that the more you can get right up front, so the earlier in the value chain, end-to-end project life cycle, the more accuracy you can drive in there, the greater predictability of your future capital outturn is going to be. And I actually think that's where there's a benefit of AI, because where AI can do high level design, where you have algorithms, genetic algorithms, where you have machine learning and models that are learning and growing and understanding and getting that accuracy of design costs up front, then you'll see a greater predictability of what your long-term capital costs are going to be. So in my view, using AI in the right part of the value chain of the capital program, I would think would have a strong recommendation for rating the predictability. And there is a stat that's floated around, which is about you do get the more predictability you can put up front in a capital program, you can reduce kind of capital leakage by about 20% of your overall total cost. So again, you're reducing your cost, but it's giving you greater predictability.
Great. Oh, thank you, Jillian. And I'll go to the next question here. It's just, do you have any public case studies or anything that you can share that EY's done or peers have done in the industry that we could share with the construction sector to get better AI or adoption of AI and or digital technology in general? Sorry, Jonathan, were you going to come in there? Oh, no. I thought you were coming off mute. Yeah, well, first of all, this is one of the reasons I strongly recommend looking at the FIDIC report. Obviously, part of the reason that we're here today, and there's a lot in there. And I do think when we launched it in Geneva, there was links to some external case studies. So absolutely, we can have a look at that. Sorry, Jonathan, I think you were trying to come in there.
No, my computer froze and screen froze. I was rapidly trying to get it to unlock itself. Yes, no, the FIDIC report is a good example. Some of the case studies aren't yet in the public domain yet. They're still in a client confidential space, but we'll signpost what we can through the FIDIC report. Great, thank you. So I think with that, we'll probably wrap up. I do have a million questions around, impacts on insurance, because you get more predictability in things, and schedule accuracy and things. So I was going to go down that route. And the other thing is just like a lot of what we do in construction relies on people who have
30 plus years experience to operate and maintain infrastructure assets. And it goes back to, can we get to points where treatment plants and a variety of infrastructure that we rely on, where we're doing it more predictable because we have this, and we're less reliant on, someone who is, one person within this massive organization who's responsible for all the potable water in a community, for example. So anyways, we don't have time for that, but we could have gone on for another hour. So I want to thank both Gillian and Jonathan for joining us today. Again, that FIDIC report, I believe that can be found online or on the EY website. So we can share that with attendees. This is being recorded and will be shared as well. So feel free to those who attended, share it with your colleagues. Our next webinar is happening the third week of December. It's with DPR Construction and their strategy and growth into the offsite sector, and how they invested and how they view kind of the transition or the addition of the factories and offsite building into their portfolio and becoming a vertically integrated organization. So we hope to see everyone there for that one in December. Finally, I just want to thank our sponsors again, the Government of Canada, specifically ACOA, and OSCO Construction Group for their continued support. Thank you, Gillian and Jonathan. I'm sure we'll be in touch again in the future, and have a great day.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.